Welcome to Breaking News with Ben Hunt, Jack Forehand, and Matt Ziegler. Before we start, let me remind you what the show is not. Breaking News is not a show about fact-checking. Breaking News is not a show about saying whose bias is the one and only correct bias. And Breaking News is definitely not a show about calling out fake news. Breaking News is a show where we look at today's top stories and have a conversation around our favorite critical question, why am I reading this now? Drawing on the headlines we're tracking at fiatnews.com, join us as we talk about what's collectively making us tick, with clear eyes, full hearts, and this obligatory disclaimer. Nothing in this podcast is advising you to buy or sell any security or to do anything with your money. Seriously, you should only act on investment advice from someone you know and someone who knows your unique situation. We are not that person.
Welcome to Breaking News. You're on the Epsilon Theory YouTube channel. I'm Matt Ziegler, joined as always by Jack Forehand. Say hello, Jack.
Hello, Jack.
Ben Hunt. Say hello, Ben.
Hello, Ben.
The news, it's like it just keeps coming and doesn't stop. We got a big show.
That's the thing, right? It just keeps coming.
Fast and Furious, with not enough Vin Diesel for my taste these days. We got a Zeitgeist, the picking process of Kamala Harris. Can't we just go blueberry picking in the summer? No, that's not the way it works anymore. A tweet of the week, the U.S. accusing Andrew Left, that's short seller Andrew Left, of fraud for price targets. I can't wait to get into this. Jack, you have a dumb question on giving out green cards to foreign college graduates. I've got a 365 breaking party news party section on Charlie XCX's Brat and what I think it tells us about surviving the Great Ravine. Being a little bit weird. Can't wait to go there with you guys. But first, our big story. This is where we start. Biden's out. Kamala's in. What's the election look like now? I actually want to start with this. What is up with just like the proclamation of it was Biden was out and like we had a day of open conventions and like dialogue of what's going to happen. Why is it just we are but powerless peons in the system and they just tell us the way everything works? Is that how this goes now? How does this make us feel? What's going on, Ben?
Well, look, I mean, the fact is that political parties are private organizations and they can, have whatever rules they like to choose who the candidates are. There was a conscious effort of starting like 40 or 50 years ago to make it more quote unquote democratic primary systems and the like. I will say that, when you have an incumbent president, that primary, voting has all the significance of elections in the Soviet Union. I mean, there's typically token, if that, opposition. And those hubs where it's more than token opposition, and you can point to a couple of them. I mean, when Teddy Kennedy, challenged for the primary, Ronald Reagan challenging for a primary. Those end up being not good for the party. So the parties hate that. These private organizations who seek to win elected office, they hate that sort of primary competition when you've got an incumbent like the Democrats did this year. So I get it. I mean, there's this notion that, the Democratic Party was subverting democracy by not going by the wishes of the diehard Democrats who actually voted in basically an uncontested primary. I mean, come on, give me a break. I mean, that's concern trolling. That's what that is. It's concern trolling by people who aren't Democrats, right? They're Republicans, who are, you're violating democracy by this. And so that's ridiculous. It really is. It's absurd. But here's what's not ridiculous, Matt. It is something that I've really been, I'd say wrestling with, but more like it's not really wrestling. And I think this is something that's shared by a lot of us who I would characterize as being in the middle, I'm definitely not part of the Democratic Party base. I lean more Democratic. I say I do than Republican. I'm a never Trumper. I'm pretty clear about that. And I lean Democrat, but I'm not part of the base. And man, I'm relieved that we have a competent candidate. I mean, competent in the sense of physically, mentally competent to run, right? So, I mean, my objection to Biden is, he's not competent to be president for another 4 years. It's just not. It's just not. So I'm relieved we have a competent candidate. And at the same time, are we just going to forget that, we didn't have an active primary because we were told, oh yeah, Joe Biden, he's sharp as a tack, until we all saw what we all saw. And then it was like, oh yeah, he's actually not. So anyway, here's Kamala Harris. So, it doesn't really irk me that there's this anointing of Kamala Harris. I get it. It's a private party, private organization, political parties. They can have whatever selection rules they want. I get that. But now we're being asked to pretend that none of that ever happened. That the people now running the Kamala Harris campaign and are in the White House, that it's like, oh, sorry about that. And we're just going to move on as if it never happened. So I'm very ill at ease about that. And what it strikes me is that we now have a situation where we've got an energized Republican base. We're only 2 weeks away from the Republican convention, which was as energetic a convention as I've seen, despite the actual candidate's best efforts to bring it down with a hour and a half long acceptance speech. And, despite choosing, Vance, maybe we'll talk about that too. Despite the candidate's best efforts to sabotage his own, convention, there was a lot of energy in the base for Donald Trump. Today, we've got a lot of energy in the Democratic base for Kamala Harris. Both parties are doing what they have to do. We've talked about this, 15 times here on Breaking News, that these national elections are turnout elections. It's not about changing someone's mind. It's about, can you get your people out to vote on election day? And both sides are doing just that, which is the smart strategy. And I'm kind of left here in the middle saying, screw it. I'm just, it's all just made up. It's all just made up. And when the made up story doesn't work, like it didn't work for Joe Biden, we just move on as if that never happened. And don't get me started about the way that Donald Trump just makes up reality left and right. Don't even get me started. I don't trust any of these parties. Why are we even playing this game is what I'm asking myself. Why am I playing this game is what I'm asking myself.
What's the alternative?
And my answer is I don't want to play the game.
What's the alternative? Like what's your responsible alternative, just as an adult in America who feels stuck in the middle of this thing going, I don't want to play this game?
Just to do that, to not give them your attention, to not give them your heart. And it is difficult because we're barraged with it all the time. And people will say, well, don't you think it matters who's elected? And yes, it matters. But I don't trust either political party to act for my interest, to act for the country's best interests. I think that about specific policies as well. I very much care about both having secure borders and also not having concentration camps in the United States, which a mass deportation policy would require. I care a lot about that. I care a lot about that. But I'm convinced, frankly, that the only policy that's worse than the Democratic policy of just kind of wink at the border and allow mass asylum and the like, the only policy that's worse than that is a concentration camp mass deportation. They're both terrible policies. They're both terrible policies. And I'm not really excited that, well, I think two things. One, I'm not really excited about either policy being in place. Not excited at all. And two, I feel certain that both sides, both political parties, want this as an issue to fight over, and neither political party actually wants some sort of reasonable policy solution to it. I feel that that's true about abortion. I feel that that's true about immigration. I feel that that's true about foreign policy. I feel that that's true about domestic economic policy. I feel it's true about everything. That there is actually no sincere effort or interest in having a legitimate policy solution, and that there's extreme interest in having it as an ongoing policy conflict. So I speak for myself. I'm out. I'm going to focus on what I think has some authenticity to me, which is local action, including local politics. But I just can't do it anymore. I can't manufacture the outrage. I can't forget what I know, what we all saw just, a week and a half ago. I can't do it anymore. That's where I am at.
Going back to
let me ask
Biden
you guys, where are you guys on this? I mean, this isn't just, where are you guys on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough world to be a middle. I mean, I'm kind of in the middle too. That's the way I've always been, and like it's a tough world to be that right now. There's not much for you out there. I mean, I guess it's better. I mean, I would personally think Harris is a better candidate than Biden. So, I guess on net we've got a little bit better situation than we had before, but it's still not great. So yeah, and it's also still, what was interesting to me is like in the wake of the Trump thing, we had talked about, toning down the rhetoric and all that stuff. And it just, maybe 48 hours, Ben. How long did that last?
Yeah, not even that. Not even that.
We're literally right. Exactly back to where we
about
were.
That. Right. So, we've read a couple of pretty good notes this month. And the note I wrote on this, this is the Great Ravine. This is what it looks like, is that, nobody's backing down from the words that are drivers of political violence. Sorry, that's the only way to say it. They are. Honestly, I'm kind of relieved to see the messaging of they're weird, because that's actually a ratcheting down of language. In this case, I think I welcome ratcheting down of language. I think it's an effective ratcheting down of language. And I think that's actually a meaningful ratcheting down of language.
I'm struggling.
You guys, what are your guys' reaction to what's happening?
I'm struggling with, and this was a conversation, like wife and I at the bar having dinner days ago, whatever, last Friday or something. And the bulk of the conversation was, can't handle this, whatever this is, and this constant I want to go to the baseball game and know, even if I'm rooting for my home team and against the other team or vice versa, that when we leave, it's not going to be like a brawl in the parking lot. Like I'm okay with the Democrats in the neighborhood and the Republicans in the neighborhood. I'm okay with all these things. And what can we do in our lives to try to reemphasize that? And we spent a dinner kind of like talking about, we're watching the Olympic opening ceremonies on one screen in this bar, and we're watching, the local news on the other. And we had a really great conversation about some of the local charities who were being highlighted in some of the commercials. We're like, you know what? All this stuff that's going on, we need to realign ourselves with another local charity and another local thing where we can try to make a difference in the community and not try to make a difference. And I like the way that you explained it, because it's this, what it feels like here is just a commitment to more conflict. It doesn't feel like a commitment to actually getting anything done aside from how will conflict motivate a base. And I'm not interested in playing that game. I'd rather try to figure out what shelter we can try to volunteer time or effort or whatever else at. That's
How
right.
does your wife feel about it? I'm curious, man. How's your wife? Because my wife
leading
it's
the
hard for me to
charge.
have this conversation because she is more partisan than I am, and I get it, and I'm not, and that's fine. But it's yeah. How did that go?
Leading the charge. Like where, like I've said this to you sooner, like focus on the things that we can actually do. And like right off the bat, she's like, well, here's one of the women's shelters in town that, this would mean a lot to me. Let's figure something out. And it's okay. Let's not just talk about it though. Let's actually go through with doing that, because I think both of us are really feeling, we're in a swing state. We're seeing the awfulness of the ads, watching those games on television, like watching the Phillies games. We see them. We saw that 2 days of dialing down the rhetoric after the assassination attempt. And then we saw it go right back. As soon as Kamala was announced, that ad spend jumped back on. And it was, do you trust this woman, while we're watching Joe Biden fall down the stairs again and her standing there? And the way that they cut and frame this stuff. It's like, it's all gross. It's all gross. It's just trying to get us angry without actually talking about doing anything. So how can we actually just do something? And if the only thing we can control to do is help somebody in the community, then that's the overwhelming feeling in the Ziegler household these days.
It's
I love
funny
that.
that, like for me, like this hit home a lot for me recently, because I was having a conversation with some of my extended family, and basically it's someone who's usually a pretty rational person. And we were talking about potentially Trump getting elected. And I was saying, I mean, obviously, as I've said on this, I'm not a fan of Trump. I certainly don't think Trump should be elected. But they were saying to me, I was like, well, if he wins, it'll probably be a bad 4 years, but then it's over for him. And they're like, no, it's not over for him. He's going to be the ruler for life. Like, I'm like, well, there's term limits. Well, no, they're getting rid of the term limits. Like, so it's just amazing to me how people feel about this stuff. And then they were kind of saying to me, well, you're a Trumper because you think he's not going to make himself a ruler for life. So
Right.
It's just interesting to me, like the degree of this. And it like when it gets into like someone in your extended family, you just see like how much this is affecting all of us.
Yeah, absolutely, Jack. 100%.
I want to take us to the zeitgeist. I want to take us into, and I think we're already kind of there, and just the feeling out. So we said we're going to talk about the picking process of Kamala Harris, but I think let's unpack the layers of kind of that private mechanism that actually decides these things. I love that you led this off with reminding us that these are private organizations and how they operate. Do you have some insight on how just like the campaign funding froze for Biden and then Kamala stepped into this, like what some of these machinations were that actually happened behind the scenes in the last few weeks?
Well, it's what, we're writing about, what we've been talking about is that, common knowledge, what we all know that we all know, it's the most powerful force in society. It really is. It's how countries go to war. It's what takes you to the moon, right? It's undefeated. Common knowledge is undefeated. And we all saw what we all saw at the debate and wrote about it then. And this is what happened is it's over. It's like a chicken with his head cut off. The chicken's got to run around for a little bit, saying, oh, I'm still alive. I'm still alive. You're not. You're dead. It's over. It's over. And so it took whatever it took, 3 weeks for, the Biden campaign to run around with his head cut off. And then it collapses. Now, collapsing means you run out of money, you run out of support, and it was all those things. It was all those things. I mean, nobody was actually going to show up to go vote for Joe Biden. And if you don't show up to vote for Biden, it means you're not showing up to vote for the other Democratic candidates. So it was going to be a disaster. It doesn't matter what the polls were saying of, oh, here's the matchup. Who do you like between the two? Our elections are turnout elections. And this is why the polls don't do such a good thing, because it's costless to say, yeah, I'll pick that one or I'll pick this one. And the notion of being a registered voter versus a likely voter is just a likely voter in the sense of, oh, you have a demographic that makes you likely to go to the polls. That's what that difference means. So, forget what the polls were, which had, Trump maintaining his lead. The real polling that was causing all Democratic candidates, everyone in the party to say, the chicken is dead, is that when you poll and you know the people who are actually going to show up, it's like nobody's actually showing up. They may say, oh yeah, I prefer Biden to Trump, but they're not actually going to go vote because they don't. Nobody. How could you be excited about that? So, that's all it is that went into it. It's all of that. And it took 3 weeks for the chicken to run around with his head cut off. And it just, but that's what I can't unsee, right? I mean, we all saw and you all saw at the debate, and it didn't just happen like that at the debate. It didn't just happen like that. And so all of us have been lied to, and it's that, because that's what it is. It's just we've been told an untruth, and it's been covered up. Oh, we can't, give the actual audio tapes of Joe Biden's, deposition. We'll give you a transcript, right? We can't give you the audio tape of his deposition with Robert Hur, the special prosecutor, special counsel on the, classified documents case. It's been covered up. And I can't forget that. I can't pretend like, oh yeah, forget all that. That's what bugs me, Matt. It's not that, oh, the Democratic Party chose a candidate that would not alienate existing blocks within the party, that B, would not require more attacks internally, but where we could, get as much of the cash, reallocate as we can. We've got the organizational staff set up. We just change the name, move the second person to the top person. We're going to treat it like the guy at the top of the ticket had a stroke. That's what we're going to treat it. And I get that. I mean, all the concern trolling from the Republicans about, oh, you're violating the will of the people. Give me a break. What if Biden had a stroke? Would you be saying, oh no, he's still got to run. He's still got to run. Because that's basically what happened. It's just that he's having a slow motion incapacitating event that actually started probably a year and a half or more ago, as opposed to a punctuated event like a stroke. But that's what happened here. So it's not the process. It's everything that led up to this process being required to take place. That's what I can't forget.
Yeah, I had this completely wrong in our last episode, because I was talking about, I thought the pressure on Biden was going to go down in the wake of the Trump assassination attempt. And I thought he probably would make it through. And basically, if anything, it seemed like it went up. And maybe part of that was the Trump stuff didn't really last very long. The whole reaction to the assassination, 48 hours later, we're back to business as usual. Maybe part of it is, it seemed like we had talked before, like at least he could read the teleprompter, but it seemed like things had deteriorated a little bit on that front too.
Well, Jack, isn't that weird too? I mean, it's like, by God, I mean, he came within that, he's at 1/4 of an inch. I probably think it's more like 1/2 of an inch or 3/4 of an inch from being killed. And it's like, that never, like that never happened. Or if it did happen, it's like, you've got half of Democrats or a good third of Democrats think that, well, it wasn't really a bullet, or, oh, it was somehow kind of not real. I mean, and then a third of Republicans saying, well, Joe Biden, well, he's actually already dead. Yeah, that's an imposter. And it's like, what the hell, people? Where are we in this world? And this is where I want, this is what I mean about how we've had reality handed to us, proclaimed to us. Once we go down this path of saying, oh yeah, President, he's sharp as a tack. And then we all say that's not true. It's like, okay, that never happened. Now, ta-da, here's the reality. Or, again, all the reality by proclamation that we saw in the Trump administration and then as a candidate. I mean, come on. But once you go down this path of just saying, here's reality, it's reality by proclamation, it's like, well, everyone thinks, well, I could do that. I can proclaim a reality too. I want to proclaim a reality rightly. Joe Biden's already dead. Proves me wrong. I want to proclaim a reality where, oh, I think it was ketchup on his ear. Or, it wasn't real. Okay, it's all just words. Everybody's just proclaiming their own reality. And that's what I'm just done with. I have to stick with the reality that I know is real.
I almost did that for Tweet of the Week this week. And just as a public service announcement for the viewers out here, if you decide you want to do these conspiracy theory for things for Tweet of the Week, don't start bookmarking them on Twitter. Because that ends very, very badly for your feed, as I've learned, because I am deep in conspiracy theories in my Twitter feed. But like, there was stuff around like a woman in glasses sitting behind Trump was the assistant FBI director. Like, that had tens and tens of thousands, like was a spotter for the shooter. That had tens and tens of thousands of likes on Twitter. It was crazy.
Yeah. She was a brunette. That was the similarity.
Right, pretty much.
Yeah. And she didn't react in shock, right? When the thing happened, she started filming it. And I was like, oh my God. I mean, this is where we are. And why not? Right? It's just all some reality by proclamation. So let's let Laura Loomer proclaim our reality. Why not? This is what I've just got to, I'm done with it.
Do you remember the Carl Sagan thing about the dragon in the garage? Does this ring a bell to you? This is years ago. I think it was in Demon Haunted World, I want to say. There's a wonderful, wonderful thing, and he's talking about it in terms of science. But it's the premise is it's the burden of proof is on the person who says the thing. And he's like, the problem with saying I have a dragon in my garage. You go, oh, well, can I see it? And you go, well, it's invisible. Like, oh, can I touch it? It's over there, and you can't see it either. And the problem is once you've introduced the idea of the dragon, then it's just basically like the lying game on keeping the thing around it because you can't present any evidence.
Yeah. And this is what we have. That's really, I love.
We got a dragon in the garage.
Yeah, the president, oh, he's fine, sharp as a tack. Well, what about X, Y, and Z? Oh, that's just fake news. It's, I bet, Republicans do, Democrats do fake news. Oh, you're just making it up. No, it's like, and then sometimes it is just made up. Like people, oh, let's look at, do a close up of, Joe Biden's watch on his, and you do the close up and say, well, no, it says it's the time when it took place. And it's like, it's just crazy town. It's crazy town.
Well, speaking of made up things in crazy town, Jack, let's go to the tweet of the week. My favorite made up thing in the world has to be a price target. What are we looking at here?
Yeah, this is really interesting. This whole thing with Andrew Citron, I was just learning about it Andrew left from Citron. I was learning about it to get ready for this. And for anybody else who hasn't read about it yet, I'll just read a quick thing and then I'll read Ben's tweet. So the SEC complaint alleges that Left, who resides in Boca Raton, Florida, uses Citron Research website and related social media platforms on at least 26 occasions to publicly recommend taking long or short positions in 23 companies and held out the positions as consistent with his own and Citron Capital's positions. The complaint alleges that following left's recommendations, the price of the target stocks moved more than 12% on average. According to the SEC's complaint, once the recommendations were issued and the stocks moved, Left and Citron Capital quickly reversed their positions to capitalize on the stock price movements. As a consequence, Left bought back stock immediately after telling his readers to sell, and he sold stock immediately after telling his readers to buy. And so, Ben, your reaction was, ha, ha, ha. So let me get this straight. Publishing a non-consensus price target and then trading out of the stock is now illegal. So what was your reaction to this?
So my reaction to this is what, have you met Bill Ackman? Right? Have you met Kathy Wood? I mean, what, my reaction was, oh, you sweet summer child. I mean, for a Game of Thrones reference. I mean, it's like, what do you think, fund managers are doing when they go on CNBC? What do you think, the analysts are doing when they give their price target? You think they actually genuinely believe what they're telling you? I mean, what kind of world are we in? And I'll tell you the world we're in, which is that Andrew Left, he's an ass. He's a dick. I mean, if he has some correspondence, that's just, to keep away with a 10-foot pole. He's a raccoon, right? I mean, it's just, it's ridiculous. And they've got, emails from him where he's saying, hey, we're going to pump this thing or we're going to dump this thing. I mean, no kidding. Right? I mean, so this is fine. But Andrew Left's crime is that he's short, is that he's talking about stocks going down. And in particular, he is talking about, GameStop and Ryan Cohen and their stocks going down. And so you've got the LA U.S. attorney who says, oh, I'm going to prosecute this. And it's a crock is what it is, right? It wouldn't, I mean, there's a reason this didn't come out of the Southern District in New York, because I mean, if you have any familiarity with the world of finance and you would never bring this sort of case. Now, is he guilty? You know what? He probably is. He probably is. He's certainly guilty now of lying to federal agents, which is the Martha Stewart crime, right? It's never the actual crime. It's the cover-up. You lied to the federal agent who's asking you questions about it. Well, you know what? You're going to jail for that. You're going to jail for that. So that he's a dick. He's, been short stocks. He's not going out there like Kathy Wood would say, well, my bear case for Tesla is, 1,000%, increase of the stocks. Are you kidding? Even that's any different from what Andrew, what? So that was my, reaction.
What's the law here though? Like, can he go, if he goes on CNBC and says, I'm short this stock, and then the stock falls 20% the next day, can he effectively say, well, now that it fell 20%, I'm going to cover my short? Like, can he do that? Is that illegal? Well, what's the law?
Yeah. So what he could have, should have done, which is what everyone else does, you put it in the boilerplate, I can, these positions are subject to change at my discretion, right? You just have to go by the proper forms, which he did not. And then he lied about it. And, did ridiculous things like, oh, I can't get paid directly by the funds, the hedge funds or other investors I'm talking to about this. So I'm going to submit an invoice through some third party for search. And we've got a paper trail that shows, well, these are actually part of, a percentage of trading profits or something. It's always the mistake people do. They put stuff in emails and they tell you instead, and they don't just do the public boilerplate, which is what all the people who do this all the time, that's what they do. So is it lying to say, oh, I'm short the stock I'm short shares of this when actually I'm not? By the way, that whole quote of, after he gave the recommendation, he bought the shares. That's called covering the short. And when he's called, and then after he after he gave the long recommendation, he sold the stock. Well, that's called exiting your long position. What are we even doing here, people? So to your point,
I did
Jack,
think, by the way, that was a little misleading because they did use the words like reversed his position, which almost made it seem like he went from short to long, and that's not what he did. He covered the short.
He covered the short. And anyway, I get worked up about it because if that's what it is it's the use of our legal system to go after a guy who pissed off some people. Right. And so it's not that, well, it is that many of the claims made in the indictment, I think they can just get thrown out immediately because it's what's done by everyone who goes on CNBC to talk their book. And then there are other claims of the indictment, which, you know what? It's a small IMO, right? It's not a material thing. It's a small thing. But yeah, you broke the law. Well, why, this guy's getting prosecuted and Kathy Wood is not? Are you fucking kidding me? So it's this selective prosecution. But, is he guilty of lying to federal investigators? Absolutely. Just like Martha Stewart was guilty of, selling on material non-public information for some pittance of a deal where if she had just fessed up to it, it would have been a fine and it would all been done. But no, you lie to the federal agents and whoop, to jail with you, straight to jail. But yeah, this is the world we're in. It's never the crime. It's always the cover up. Word to the wise for any, people listening. Just anyway.
I look forward to Andrew Left and Snoop Dogg on their forthcoming cookbook, or maybe they could commentate on some
by the way, Snoop Dogg, and he's the hit of the Olympics,
as he should be. Well, I don't know if as he should be, but it's amazing.
Now he's going to be a judge on The Voice with Michael Bublé. Did you see that?
I saw the commercial.
Oh yeah, what's it? This seems a little shark jumping to Harry, but what do I do?
I think he's been shark jumping for long enough that we just have to accept he's.
Speaking of Martha Stewart, best bundle of Martha. How old do you think Snoop Dogg is?
Oh, that is a great question.
That's a good question.
Is he 60? He can't be 60 yet, is he? Is he in his 50s?
He's 60 years old. Do you think Snoop Dogg's as old as I am? He's not. He's not.
I was going to say 50 something.
I was going to say,
yeah,
I would guess 50s.
I think 51 something.
Let's say early 50s because
early 50s.
90s, he would have been a teenager 50s. Still.
Yeah. Yeah. Martha Stewart's 81. Sold out. Ugh. Wow.
That's amazing.
Anywho. Yeah.
Well, why don't you take us here, Jack? You got a really smart question, I think. I've been wondering, I wonder about this one too. I think we all do. We all think about green cards and just who we keep in the country. When we think about all this border stuff, like this is the kind of the nuanced part of the debate that can we bring this back into the common discourse? Well, ask the question first, then let's talk a little bit about what's behind this.
Well, first to ask this question, I do have to admit to listening to something that there was no chance in hell either one of you would ever listen to, which was Donald Trump on the All In podcast. Because that's actually where this came from.
Wow.
But I wrote it down when I heard it because I just wanted this. It's an interesting idea. And I think, Ben, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, I think this might be an example of this Mott and Bailey thing we talked about before. But there's a big belief in Silicon Valley that we have a big problem in that we have a lot of smart people that come here to go to our universities. And then when they're done, they leave. And so the idea is we should be doing something to keep these people here. And the idea they had on this podcast is we should effectively, every single person who graduates from a U.S. university who's not, a U.S. citizen should get a green card and should be able to stay here, and that would be very beneficial to our country. So I wanted to get your take on that.
It's just madness, Jack. I mean, it's just madness. I mean, it's akin to what we have now, which is that anyone can borrow as much money as they want to go to college with no repercussions. You can't ever, get rid of it through bankruptcy, but you can borrow all the money in the world, as much as you want to borrow, to go to schools. And that's why the cost of college keeps going up and up and up. And if some cockamamie program like this were instituted, the, cost of college would go up another 20% overnight because they can. Because what? You're not going to pay whatever to get a green card? Of course you are. And anyway, I get wrapped up in this stuff. I understand the design, the impetus to keep smart people, whatever that means. And I don't know. I hate this notion of, you sell your citizenship, on the basis of money, because that's what it is. I mentioned that about, borrow infinite. That's just for U.S. citizens, right? So if you're from outside the country, you pay full freight. I'm on the board of a couple of, private schools. I know how this works. Every school in the country, you're charging full freight plus to your international students. And that's what supports everyone and everything. And this would just be adding to that. And it's just another way of selling citizenship to people with money. That's all it is. That's what this ends up. It's another way of selling citizenship to people with money. It's not the smart people. It's not the hardworking people. It's not the, whatever standard you want for citizenship. This ain't it. This is, got some money? Great, because you're going to find a school that will admit you and give you a diploma, and you've bought your green card. It's just a way of buying a freaking green card. And it just makes a mockery out of all of this, except it sounds good.
If we take like 5 steps back, though, is there anything to this idea that you hear out of Silicon Valley all the time? Like I just heard Bill Gurley talking about it recently. This idea that we do have some really, really talented people that are going to go and start companies in other countries, and we should be finding a way to keep them here.
You know what? I'm all for changing our immigration process to allow massive more immigration. Massive. And if you start a company here, and give a green card for that. Give a green card for that. I like that. I like that a lot more than and it has to employ so many people or whatever kind of standards you want to do. It's another way of saying, well, if you've got enough money, you can do it. But there's more of a link to the qualities that talking about you want in the citizens you admit than just, can you afford to pay full freight tuition at, some American college?
So you're asking for the commitment to community with it. You're asking for like that to be the stake, not just did you pay the sticker price.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just asking for whatever system is in place, that it be equitably administered, and that it not boil down to, are you buying it? Because once you find a way to buy it, then the gatekeepers for taking the money and giving the green card are going to take all that money. So in that first suggestion, it's whoever is in the process of admissions and pricing for colleges and universities, they will get all of the benefit of that program. Every drop of it will go to the administrators of colleges and universities. If it's starting a company, then I promise you tomorrow there will be a new, business set up in venture capital world where, oh yeah, dad, invest money in my fund, we're going to set up the company and blah, blah, blah. And, your son gets the green card, the new CEO of the company. So the way our system is set up is basically done by lottery, right? So to take away these sort of choke points that will take the money, if any sort of accreditation scheme, I'm using that word in the technical sense, not in the pejorative sense, any sort of accreditation scheme for awarding the green card, the accreditators, whether that's college and university admissions, whether it's whoever accredits this company that you started, they will get the benefits of that. So yeah, I'm sure Bill Gurley's all for, making himself, I'm the accreditor, I'm one of the accreditors for getting green cards. I'm sure Bill Gurley's all for that. And so that's why we have a lottery system. So it's going to be we're not going to have an accreditation scheme where the accreditators get all the good out of that. It's a hard situation, but when I ever hear these proposals for some sort of accreditation scheme for admission, then, miraculously enough, it's always the accreditators that are proposing it because all the money is going to come to them. And it's a lot of money.
So Matt, it's time for my favorite part of the podcast. What you got in the Cultish Corner this week?
Well, I know as two, 365 brats over here, clearly you're up on all your memes and we're not talking about coconut pills. What you got, Ben? You familiar?
My daughter has informed me on who Charlie,
XCX.
3-letter person is.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm feeling kind of hip here, Matt.
I like the sound of that. Brat Jack. I'm sure you too, right? You're
Brat
way up
Jack.
on this.
I was not familiar with this.
This is not part of your household
recently, and I'm still not that familiar with it. I just saw it recently in the news.
So this is fascinating. This is testament to why you need good friends. Extra special shout out to friend of the pod, Dave Nottig, because as I'm thinking, who do I talk to about this thought that I'm having a week ago? I'm like, oh, I have another music and markets and politics nerd friend who can talk about this thing. So Charlie XCX put together a really friggin' good album. I was really excited for this thing to come out. She's been a really interesting artist for decades. Well, more than a decade at this point, since Boom Clap and then a bunch of other songs. She's not that old. She's in her 30s. But came on the scene as a young artist, did some interesting stuff, and then just kept progressing in interesting ways. Put out some really great mixtapes, put out some really great commercial albums. Never has really broken through. But before this whole Kamala Harris situation, co-opting the meme, she was already having a moment and seeing this thing evolve, really, it attached to something. So something that I keep seeing, and this keeps coming up everywhere lately, is I'm talking to a lot of people who are asking themselves just this fundamental question of am I a good person? I think I am, but how do I know I am? And am I good enough for them? Am I good enough for the others? Do they like me? Do they accept me? Because this is the way the world feels right now. What am I doing to know I'm good? What am I doing to know I'm accepted by some group and feel good about being accepted by that group and not feeling weird or ick or cringe or whatever word you want to say about this thing? And I see it in The Bear. I see it in Inside Out 2. Ben, you and I talked about this recently. Jack, have you seen Inside Out 2 yet?
I have not.
Are you in the right age range to go to this movie?
I don't know if I am or not, but I have not seen it.
Have you seen Inside Out? The original Inside Out? Inside Out 1?
No.
Oh.
It's problematic. Maybe I need to go find this right away.
Uncontrollable sobbing here, right in the movie theater. Just
you can go no matter how old you are. I will say, having uncontrollably sobbed through the first one in the best way. Like, it is a gorgeous story about, emotional realities and just human psychology at the most beautiful level. The second one, my wife and I definitely exhausted the tissues in pockets in preparation for this movie. It was like 10 minutes in, and we were like, the tissues are gone. The popcorn napkins are gone. Like, how are we going to make it through this movie flanked by basically like children? And we did. But this question, it keeps coming up in that movie too. It's in The Bear. It's in this Brat, this Charlie XCX album. And I don't want the meme to take away from, I don't want Jake Tapper or whatever explaining this thing to take away from the essence of this thing. Ben, something I know that matters to you is, and this is why I had to call Mr. Nodding, this ties back to the old stories. So I want to go all the way back to our guy Ovid. I want to go back to Narcissus, because I think this is one of those things that, another thing that's become a meme. We want to call everybody narcissists. I've been called a narcissist by people like this. Go back to the old stories and understand what's the actual underpinning of them. So a narcissist, clinical definition, something to do with a person or anyone who's selfish, entitled, lacks empathy, needs admiration. But that's not the myth of Narcissus. Now, Ben, I know you're definitely familiar with this. You've gone back and thought about this. The way Narcissus gets thrown around these days, does it line up with the myth to you, or do you feel the disconnect? I'm not asking you to reverse engineer it. I'll do that part, but.
Well, I mean, he fell in love with his own reflection. Right? I mean, that was his thing. That was his thing.
When we tell the story and we hear it told about falling in love with the reflection, and we paint it as a narcissistic character, as selfish, as entitled, of lacking empathy and dying there in pure vanity, we miss part of the nuance of what's a really powerful old story. And there's two levels of this. There's when Narcissus is born, there's this prophecy that accompanies him post-birth. His mom goes out, she gets this prophecy foretold, and the prophecy is basically that this kid is going to be indefatigably beautiful, and everybody's going to fall in love with him, but he's only going to live if he can learn to love himself. And that's the prophecy. The curse, which comes later in his life, and there's a beautiful, beautiful telling of Echo and Narcissus. I encourage you to go look this up because you should be reminded of this. But the curse comes later. The curse is that Narcissus, whoever he falls in love with, will not be able to love him back. And so we understand him falling in love with his reflection. What we have to understand is this is the curse playing out. This is Narcissus falling in love with a projection of himself that he doesn't recognize as himself. He doesn't know that's him in the river or in the pond when he sees that reflection. That's a projection of some other entity. And because he hasn't learned to love himself, that projection can't love him back. Curse of Narcissus, the reason he dies is because that thing can't love him back, because that's not actually him. He doesn't understand it as him. And he's chasing this thing that he can never fulfill because he's allowing this medium to contain love as opposed to finding the love in himself. We can see this in social media. You can see this in these places. You can see this in Weird. This is the stuff Rusty's writing about, and I can't wait for his book because it delves into with the way that this metaphor is changing right now. This is just the modern pond that we all stare into. But these questions of like the prophecy and the curse, I think it applies way more broadly. It applies to these questions. Am I a good person? I think I am. Do I believe it? Am I really that? And am I good enough for them to like, to love, etc.? So enter Charlie XCX's album. Brat is basically a statement about Narcissus, not narcissism, not narcissistic tendencies. It's a statement of Narcissus. What is Brat? Brat is this idea of she tried to be a giant pop artist. She tried to be trendy in different scenes and grow these things. And she found aspects of it fulfilling and other aspects of it unfulfilling. This poor British girl too. Like, we're talking like she's in the UK. Like, her in presidential politics in America is kind of funny on that level too. But the day her album is supposed to come out and it's supposed to chart, Taylor Swift drops an extended release of like one of her things and basically knocks her out of the #1 position on the UK charts. Like, here's a pop artist just trying to succeed. And Taylor Swift comes in and goes like, oh, I think somebody's going to knock me off. Let me issue some extra stuff. Credit to Charlie. She punches back like days later with her own reissue of here's my same album, Brat, with 3 extra songs, just to say, I understand the meta narrative. I understand to play with these rules. But if we look into this album, what we actually see is we see a young adult grappling with issues like, what does it mean to not feel good enough with your peers? What does it mean to go visit with her now partner who she's going to get married? She's engaged to get married. What does it mean to go out and think like, maybe I do want to have a baby? Maybe I can't be this party person all the time and have these things I want. Maybe trying to hit the top of the charts of being a pop star isn't the thing that I actually wanted. This album is actual real life wrestling with how can I be part of accepting that reflection in the pond isn't really me? And I have to figure out how to love myself first. The staring into the pond is, and this is hit really home for me this morning, just thinking through this, Ben, is like, this is what the Great Ravine is. This is not understanding how to step up, how to stand up from the water and go like, that's never going to love me back. That's not the projection. That's not my reflection as I understand it, or the projection of the thing that's capable of doing anything else for me. But how long are we going to sit there on the bank? How long are we going to stare into this thing that's never going to hold the answer? How long are we going to accept the curse as narcissism? How long until we're going to accept that the prophecy actually offers us a way out? But that way out is small community. That way out is make, protect, teach. That way out is like, you got to love yourself first. You got to turn around and do this. Nothing happens until you make some art out of it. And we're surrounded right now by people trying to make art about what it means to be in the Great Ravine and standing up and trying to walk away from it. Political people can take the labels and put on the cool shirt and celebrate whatever, but it's cool to dive deeper. It's cool to like fall in love with these like other ideas and stories and see what people are going through in the human experience and then figure out how to take it home. I am not a 365 party girl. I can't relate to 99% of what's in those songs, but I see somebody doing something really interesting and really novel and pushing these boundaries, and I can still get curious about it and then go, I have ways to talk to you about it without needing to mansplain it to you or something else. Like that's boring. What's exciting is finding ways to talk about art and what's interesting and beautiful in the world, and then what can we take this to our community with? I'm deeply moved by seeing people notice this and notice this beyond the meme of it all. I'm going to encourage you, throw the album on, give it a shot. Hear a young adult wrestle with the idea of being overshadowed by a talented friend. Hear a person write lyrics like you would write text messages of having to be backstage at a concert with Taylor Swift and going, I hope they break up soon, because this is really hard for me to be back here with my fiance and Taylor and her boyfriend. We can all live in this world and make stuff that we're proud of. Deeply moved by that. I got some notes for us. Want to take us out on this?
Go for it.
Ben, you started us off with this idea that political parties are private organizations. You can pretend that nothing happened. Biden, the anointing, and okay, the bases are energized and it's a turnout thing and that's what matters, but is made up really going to be the reality that we're accepting? And their answer, it doesn't have to be our answer. We get to choose how our time is allocated. We get to choose, and all three of us, I think, relating on this, we can choose the causes that we want to invest in our own communities and where we place that focus. We're still citizens. We're still looking at this bigger thing and reflecting on it, but we got to do what matters to us, to our people, to our communities, our families. Make, protect, teach. Emphasis all the way through. Polls, they're no stake commitments. This is the Zeitgeist. The donations are dollars with stakes. The reality does not equal stakes by proclamation. These are just dragons in a garage. The evidence is what matters. Again, go out and do something about it. Don't just say it. Don't just put it on social media. Go out and do something in the world. That's what counts. The tweet of the week. I love this idea. Well, I don't love this idea. I'm forlorn. I'm heartbroken by this idea. The crime is to be short and negative. The crock is to be long or bullish and not in on it. I mean, just like optimism. Can we just have some optimism? Be discriminate, people. This is why we say don't listen to the people on CNBC. Take care of your people. Take care of yourself. The crime is in the cover up. So maybe just don't do what needs to be covered up. That's a good thing to live by. I'm pro that. Green cards for education. The bottleneck. Well, just notice what they're selling. And that's what this boils down to. If you're going to put a bottleneck around something like education, you're allowing that bottleneck to be, here's where the dollars are going to flow because here's the way you buy citizenship. The more we can tie this back to community, the more all this, I think, starts to feel right again, if we can ever find a way to do that, hopefully without a war or something worse. And that brings me back to the Charlie XCX thing. It brings me back to go reread Echo and Narcissus. We want to be able to accept the prophecy, and we want to be able to reject the curse. Now, the prophecy has a knife. It cuts in both directions here. You die if you can't figure out how to love yourself, but you live if you figure out how to love yourself. Accept the prophecy, reject the curse. Commit to your causes, commit to your community, commit to your time, and commit to your choices. The only evidence we have to show for it is in our actions. I'm still an optimist. You're not going to shake me down from this thing, but the evidence is in our actions. It's all that matters. Thanks for joining me, guys.
Good art. That's what we need more of. Yeah, there you go.
Community and good art. Make it happen. And if it's on some off-color green with some fuzzy letters, maybe you can do that for the cover this week, Jack. Thanks for joining me,
I'll
guys.
work on it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you're watching breaking news so more people can find our show. If you know another clear-eyed and full-hearted individual, why not share this episode with them too? Like we said at the top, the media is making us tick, and it's our job to talk. Follow the headlines at fiatnews.com. Follow Ben at epsilontheory.com and at Epsilon Theory on Twitter. Follow Jack at validiacapital.com and at Practical Quant on Twitter. Follow Matt at sunpointinvestments.com, cultishcreative.com, and at Cultish Creative on Twitter.